Hey guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and today, in honor of Women's History Month, I would like to share the story of an amazing woman named Georgia O'Keeffe. In the story, Portrait of an Artist, Georgia O'Keeffe, we hear the story of the artist, Georgia O'Keeffe, and this story was written in 2020 by Lucy Brownridge and it's illustrated by Alice Wietzel. If you're ready to hear the story, I'm ready to share it with you. Here we go. Georgia O'Keeffe, Portrait of an Artist, Georgia O'Keeffe. Georgia O'Keeffe grew up on a wheat farm in a place called Sun Prairie. Of all her 6 brothers and sisters, Georgia was the most thoughtful. She loved the big skies, vibrating orange sunshine, and beautiful flowers on the prairie. When she looked at flowers or ears of corn, she would think very hard about the shapes of each tiny part and wondered how they could all possibly grow from the dry earth. As soon as she was old enough, she went to art school in Chicago and New York City so she could learn how to make pictures of the beautiful things she saw in the world around her. So, Georgia O'Keeffe has always enjoyed her surroundings and has paid close attention, and that's what helped her when she went to art school, is that she was able to finally learn how to paint all those details she's been noticing her whole life. Living in the big city was wonderful. It was so busy and glamorous compared to the stillness of the farm. At art school, she learned how to paint very traditional things like dark, shadowy bowls of fruit or bunches of flowers. Although she loved New York, the pictures she made didn't fill her with the same wonder as the wide open landscapes she had loved at home. So she learned how to paint lots of still lives, which will come in handy in her later years. But it didn't speak to her like the wide open spaces of Sun Prairie. One day, when Georgia was at art school, she got a letter from her mother who was very sick. Georgia had to move home and be with her. When she went back, she started working in her old high school as an art teacher. She wanted to teach the children in a completely new way and not the stuffy way she had been taught. Instead of making things look realistic, she encouraged her students to use bright colors and bold shapes and not to worry too much about whether you could tell what the picture was meant to be of. So she moved back home to take care of her sick mother and became an art teacher, and she taught kids the way she wished she had been taught. Georgia loved teaching art, but still thought about the busy excitement of New York. She often wrote to her friend who still lived in the city, and one day she put a few of her sketches inside a letter to her. Her friend saw that the drawings weren't ordinary but very special, so she passed them on to a man called Alfred Steiglitz. Alfred had been an important photographer and owned his own gallery. Alfred was amazed by Georgia's drawings. He wrote to her to ask if she would do him the honor of showing her pictures in his gallery. So Georgia just happened to send a note to one of her girlfriends and include some pictures, and those pictures got passed along to Alfred Steiglitz, who had his own gallery and was a photographer. Georgia agreed and was nervous but excited. It was strange to be back in the big city, and this time her art was on show in the hottest spot in town. She filled the show with charcoal drawings and watercolors, and all sorts of glamorous people came to see what she had made. Her success gave her new confidence. She realized she could show people things they already knew, but in a completely new way. That was her gift. So she had drawings and paintings, and glamorous, fancy people came to see them. And it made her realize that she could show people things that they'd already seen, but in new ways. Georgia was proud of her show, but not satisfied. She felt her charcoal pictures were bold, but not colorful enough. And her watercolor pictures were colorful, but too watery. She started to use oil paint because the colors were as bright and as bold as the colors in nature. Oil paint could look as deep and velvety as the middle of jewel-like flowers. And that is exactly what she started to paint. She wanted to make tiny flowers big, important, and unmissable. They were so close up, you could hardly tell what they were. No one had done this before. So this is one of the types of things that Georgia O'Keeffe became famous for. It's her paintings of flowers, and she changed to oil painting so that she could get those vibrant colors. As Georgia grew happier, she started to notice beauty in the city where she hadn't before. At first, the cold, harsh skyscrapers had made her feel small. Now their towering watch was comforting and made her feel powerful. The buildings looked as beautiful to her as mountains. As she fell in love with New York, she also fell in love with Alfred. In no time at all, the pair were married and became towering giants of the New York art scene. The whole of New York waited to see what Georgia would paint next. So she started liking the city. She fell in love with Alfred, and they got married. But Georgia didn't let the pressure get to her. Georgia and Alfred were very happy. They traveled together, and Georgia painted more and more. Alfred even started taking photographs again. Georgia's enthusiasm for life revived the artist inside him, too. But Alfred was much older than Georgia and started to become sick. So Alfred and Georgia did a lot of fun things together and inspired one another. But Alfred was older and he got sick, and Georgia had to take care of him just as she had done her mother in the past. Alfred had to stay at home more and more, and Georgia discovered new places by herself. She visited New Mexico, where the hot desert mountains gave her the same feeling of excitement as the big city skyscrapers had. They felt old and wise, but also like something new and just for her. The wide open space gave her time to think about new paintings and about complicated feelings of sadness she had about Alfred's well-being. So she came to New Mexico, which is where I'm from, and she started painting the beautiful landscape. And she said that the mountains spoke to her just as the skyscrapers did. And they do say a lot. Very soon, her beloved and inspiring Alfred passed away. While Georgia was terribly sad, she had so many ideas to put into her pictures. She started to paint more than ever, and from now on, painting would be her entire life. Now she was famous. Everyone in the city had an opinion on what her art meant and what she should do next. But Georgia had no time for being bossed about by art people in the city. New York was no longer the place for her. Nature was calling her back. So her husband passed away, and she could paint whatever she wanted because she was famous now. But she didn't want to paint the city anymore. She wanted to go back to nature. So she moved to New Mexico, where her heart leapt, just as it had the time she had first painted flowers and then skyscrapers. Her great new love was the powerful shape of the mountains, the big sky, and the hot earth. She lived in a house built from the red earth. It reminded her of the beautiful red mountains of the nearby Ghost Ranch, which always loomed large in her imagination. From the porch, she even had a view onto what she called her own private mountain. It was far from people. She called it her faraway nearby. She felt that her new surroundings connected her to nature and the bare bones of life. She spent day after day roaming the plains and finding strange objects that she couldn't wait to take home and paint. So she became, after she moved to New Mexico, she became really famous for painting sun-bleached bones and landscapes and other things she found. One summer, she traveled to show her paintings in Mexico and met another brilliant painter called Frida Kahlo. They became close friends, and Georgia inspired Frida to follow her own path and not listen to other people. If they told her they shouldn't listen to other people if they told her what she should paint. Frida listened very carefully and went on to become the most famous painter Mexico has ever seen. Georgia was still busy. She flew all over the world opening shows and meeting glamorous people. But after a while, she wondered if that was what she wanted. As she looked out of the airplane window, she longed to be home and to paint the big skies. So she met other famous painters and inspired them, and then flew all over the world opening shows, but decided that the big skies just kept calling her back. As Georgia became older and her eyesight started to fade, she traveled less and less and spent time where she had found real happiness. Georgia had achieved more than she had ever imagined and was known the world over as the mother of American modernism. She was pleased, but she didn't live to impress others. All she lived for was the sky, the earth, and to paint. At last, she was peacefully alone in nature with a brush in hand. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story of Georgia O'Keeffe. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, please click that subscribe button down at the bottom of the page, and don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. I'd like to say a big thank you to the Howie family for loaning me an amazing collection of books that I get to share with you, my YouTube watchers. Until next time, bye-bye.